In a region surrounded by water, Southeast Asia has, for centuries, depended on sea transport for much of its trading activities. Today, the same still holds true. Indonesia values its shipping industry at $20 billion. 95% of Malaysia's international trade is carried by seaborne traffic. The Philippines is the world's largest supplier of qualified seafarers. About 300,000 maritime personnel from the Philippines work on foreign ships around the world.
And in Singapore, shipping is a major pillar of its economy, contributing about 7% to the country's gross domestic product. In this episode of ASEAN Spotlight, we look at the challenges of ASEAN's maritime industry. We also find out what it takes to ensure the shipping sector remains smooth sailing.
In recent times, ASEAN's maritime industry is facing strong headwinds in an increasingly challenging global environment. In Singapore, the shipping industry is also navigating difficult waters. Last year, the Singapore port saw a decline in container volumes for the first time since the 2009 global financial crisis. A softening global demand, capacity oversupply, and depressed freight rates are signaling choppy seas ahead for the industry. Amidst the gloomy forecast, Singapore's iconic shipping firm Neptune Orient Lines was acquired by French shipping giant CMA CGM. But the Singapore government still believes the country's maritime industry can ride out the storm.
The maritime community here is resilient and adaptable. Employment levels in the maritime sector have also remained stable at around 170,000. With government support, we believe that recovery in shipping will return and broad-based growth momentum will pick up again.
Singapore is not alone in projecting a turnaround for the shipping industry. Industry players believe Asia too has good long-term growth prospects and remains one of the fastest growing regions in the world. Asia already accounts for about 70% of global container throughput handled by the world's top container ports. 9 out of the world's 10 busiest container ports are also in Asia. And initiatives such as the establishment of the ASEAN Economic Community will go a long way in spurring intra-regional trade.
Possibilities of economic development and improving the lives of our people in a slow global environment, and how we can work together and cooperate and integrate our economy so that we can mutually benefit, whether it's talking about global institutions like IMF and World Bank, whether it's talking about TPP, whether it's talking about the ASEAN community. We all have to work together in order to better our lives and to deal with shared problems, including problems between ourselves. And it's patient work. You go meeting by meeting and item by item, and sometimes seems to take a long time. But cumulatively, if you look back at where we were when we started this process, maybe about 20 years ago with ASEAN, when we first started having regular ASEAN summit meetings and talking about an ASEAN free trade area, I think we've come a long way.
The ASEAN Economic Community, or AEC, was established last year to provide a boost to regional economic integration. And the shipping sector is seen as one of the key pillars of the project to achieve these aims. The ASEAN single shipping market envisions little restriction to the movement of ships and the provision of shipping services in the region. The liberalization of the shipping environment in the region will also cover the passenger sector. Earlier this year, the tourism ministers of ASEAN launched the inaugural Cruise Southeast Asia brand to establish the region as a cruise destination. The idea for a unified regional brand was proposed by Singapore, and the rest of ASEAN were all on board with this effort to grow the cruise industry together. Already, the Singapore cruise industry has been enjoying fair winds in its sales. Despite a drop in visitor numbers in Singapore, there was a 14% increase in cruise passenger throughput last year.
cruise actually complements our tourism offerings very well. It brings in substantial visitor arrivals as well as tourism receipts. So for example, in the strategic partnerships that I highlighted earlier with Royal Caribbean and TUI Cruises, over 3 years, the cruise lines will be home porting in Singapore, and that itself will be bringing in more than 260,000 visitors and over $150 million in tourism receipts.
And this has also benefited the rest of ASEAN.
It was great foresight by the Singapore government to invest and build the Marina Bay Cruise Center, because without it, we would not be able to bring the newest and most modern ships to ASEAN. All the cruises that Royal Caribbean has starting in Singapore goes to other ports in ASEAN. We're bringing 30% more passengers to places in Malaysia and Thailand particularly. We'd like to go to more ports, but one of the challenges we have is port infrastructure.
ASEAN will face the same challenges in the implementation of the single shipping market. These arise from different levels of economic development, different working conditions, and different infrastructure across the 10 member nations. Port infrastructures in Southeast Asia are well below average levels in the developed world. But analysts believe the benefits outweigh the problems, as establishing a unified regional shipping market will promote greater trade and economic development in the region.
If the ASEAN single shipping market does set sail, the shipping sector could play a role in helping ASEAN realize its motto of one vision, one identity, one community through the creation of an integrated trade and economic region.